Well, hi, folks. Here's Jeff Salzman and Keith Witt, the Shrink and the Abundant. Keith, me, the Shrink, my beloved buddy, Jeff, the Abundant, here to talk about all things integral. And today, we're going to talk about the integration of defenses line of development. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing great, and I'm interested in this defenses line of development.
Yeah, integration of defenses line of development.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yes, I'm eager to hear this, Keith.
So, just some preliminary with this. The reason why I got into this is Tom Habib presented at our Soul Tank group this morning on his couples line of development. And about a month ago, I had invited him to talk. But then I've never written anything about the integration of defenses line. And I've been talking about it ever since I wrote Waking Up, which is my textbook on integrally informed psychotherapy. So I started diving into it and sent Corey some notes because I wanted to do a podcast with Corey about it. And it just expanded, as it always does, because integral has so many perspectives. Once you start examining anything, those new perspectives yield more stuff and more data and more directionality for research. And particularly the integration of defenses line is important for reasons that I'm going to discuss. So first of all, what are defenses? Okay, Bruce.
Okay, well, let me just say this, just in terms of putting it in the aqua model perspective. So all quadrants, levels, lines, states, and types. So this would be a line of development.
That's right.
And it's a line of defenses being how one defends against the world, psychologically defends.
Okay, so the integration of defenses lines says that there are defensive states that cause us problems for reasons that I'll explain. And people have varying capacities to regulate those defensive states into states of healthy response to the present moment. How well you regulate that state, that defensive state, into a state of healthy response demonstrates altitude on the integration of defenses line. Low altitude is that you enter a defensive state and you're in its grip and you can't make any decisions other than what the defensive state wants you to do, which is usually destructive impulses. High on the integration of defenses line, you notice the defensive state, you are able to regulate it to a healthy state, and you do it routinely. And if you're super high on the integration of defenses line, you don't just regulate it into a state of healthy response, you regulate it into a state of social engagement where you are literally emanating harmony into the social fabric. Where you go, harmony follows. That's the 10th ox cart picture. I
want that.
Yeah. Well, you have that one in quite a lot, as we'll discover. So just to kind of get the basics down, Bruce Lipton, in the biology of transcendence, he started out as a cell biologist. And he says that cells are always either growing or defending. And this is true of the first prokaryote cells 2 billion years ago. And all throughout evolution, growing and defending has gotten more and more complex until finally we're at human beings who have the most sophisticated and complex mechanisms for both growth and defending in the known universe. So that's us. And defenses are not necessarily bad. If you touch a hot stove and pull it away, that's a defense. Somebody gets mad at you and you go, oh, I better be cautious of that person. That's a defense. If you're walking down the trail and you're looking up and you're not looking where you put your foot down, you go, I should watch where I put my feet in the mountains. That's a defense. And all those are examples of healthy defenses. And we all need them. If we didn't have them, we would quickly die. I wouldn't look both ways before I cross the street. That's a defense.
Right.
Now, that being said,
could we say that it's like, as general, we often think of like the survival, that's like the basic need for every organism.
That's true.
And that
Yes.
like that.
Well, yeah, though, if you look at every level, this is Maslow's hierarchy. If you look at every
Okay.
level of Maslow's hierarchy, there will be a form of threat and a form of defense. That's true for survival. That's true for comfort.
Okay.
For comfort, I'm getting too cold. I want to make it warmer. That's a defense. For belonging, Jeff didn't smile at me when I said hi. Are we okay? Yes, we're okay, Keith. That's a defense. Self-esteem. Oh God, I made a mistake. I'm a schmuck. No, actually, Keith, you just made a mistake, and calling yourself a schmuck is a bad habit. Okay, that's self-actualization. I have an opportunity. I noticed a defensive state arising, and at first I go, oh, I don't want to look at that, and then I go, wait a minute, go a little bit deeper into that. That's an opportunity. And for the other aspects, the other parts of the hierarchy, the same thing. So at every level, at every value mean, defenses happen and they're regulated better or worse. Particularly, we go through the life in two major kinds of states. One is states of healthy response. We're ultra social. So what does that mean? Nothing on this planet is as social as human beings, other than ants and bees and stuff. But there's no mammals. They're as social as we are. So states of healthy response are we're socially engaged with each other if it's between us, and making good things happening, feeling safe, and we're intrapsychically, we're socially engaged with the different parts of ourselves. So right now, you and I feel like all the different Jeffs and all the different Keiths are kind of operating in unison. If they're a choir, everybody's singing in tune, and so on. So that's a state of healthy response. We spend most of our time there. The other state is if our nervous system reads threat, it instantiates a defensive state. And that defensive state has amplified or numbed emotions to motivate us to act, to protect ourselves. It has distorted perspectives. It brings us stories and perspectives that seem proportionate to us, to the amplified or numbed emotion, and that justify our destructive impulses to fight, flee, or freeze. And it has diminished capacities for empathy because you don't want to be empathic with someone who threatens you, and self-reflection. You don't have time to look at your own stuff if you're in a dangerous situation. So the nervous system pulls that out. And 70,000 years ago, in the ancestral tribes, these defensive states in the groups maintain social coherence and harmony. Because there's a whole set of tribal rules and all that other stuff, and all these moral foundations that we all have that we talked about, many episodes ago. And if a threat happened, you entered a defensive state, that instinct to fight, flee, or freeze would maintain coherence in the tribe. Fight, you get dominant submission going on. Freeze, you submit. Flee, you get away from, for instance, women, when they're stressed, will go seek the comfort of other women, naturally. Men, when they're stressed, will seek solitude, naturally. Okay, those are defenses, okay, that are instinctual, coming from defensive states. But here we are now. We have, at this point, such incredibly potent conflict resolution skills, social engagement skills, communication skills, and processing skills, that those ancient defenses now are outmoded and they're destructive in our current lives. Why? Because we have so much better, more sophisticated defenses available that actually create more love, more understanding, more self-awareness. And
this would be the manifestations of the higher stages on this line.
These are the manifestations of the higher stages on the line. And so that's why the defensive states are so automatic. They worked so well for 5 billion years. Now we have these incredibly effective other modes, but we have to teach our nervous system how to do it. And if we don't teach our nervous system how to do it, depending upon the amount of threat, it'll keep sending these defensive states that we will have varying levels to notice and regulate. that ability to notice and regulate defensive states is an acquired social skill. If it's not taught, you're not going to learn it. If it's not modeled, you're not going to learn it. Because when you go through critical developmental stages, you need to have models around that you can grow towards. And so if you don't have models that can resolve conflict into love, then you're going to have difficulty doing it. And if you pass that critical period, probably the first 7 or 8 years, it'll require a lot more effort to learn how to do it than it did before, which is enter the whole profession of psychotherapy. But before that, there were a lot of other people that were doing that too. Well, I'll talk about that because at every value meme, starting with tribal, there were therapists. They just didn't call themselves therapists. Okay? So here's what high on the integration of defensive line looks like. You're aware when you enter a defensive state. You notice the signature. The signatures are generally an affect, fear, anger, shame, guilt, regret. A lot of the painful affects will arise. You get a little curious. This is high level. You have a distorted perspective. Jeff is looking at a difference in distance. He doesn't like me. That's a distorted perspective. Okay. You have a destructive impulse. I don't think I'll say anything about it. Maybe it'll upset him. Okay. Which is flight. Okay. You have diminished capacities for self-reflection. On self-reflection, Keith, it never works ever to not talk to Jeff about anything. So you better do it. And empathy, of course, if Jeff wants me to do whatever it takes for me to be in loving contact with Jeff. So if I have all those awarenesses, then I just make an adjustment and bam, we're back to healthy response to the present moment. If I don't do that, then problems arise. Because if you indulge those distorted perspectives, you start building, using your superhuman conscious intelligence to building bigger and bigger stories about how this other person is to blame or bad. You start having more extreme impulses to attack or flee. You're more defended against not looking at your own part of it, self-reflection. And you're more invested in not having empathy, the more damage you do. And there's a lattice. Corey said we should have a lattice. I said, sure, like starting with magenta. And then I said on the horizontal thing, I think there should be capacities. One capacity is relative awareness of defensive states. Another capacity is, do you have a choice to do something different, or do you just have to do that destructive impulse? A third thing is, how much damage are you willing to do? Okay. Like you and I are not capable of doing much damage. If you start saying something and if you see even a look of hurt on my face, you will get concerned, stop everything and take care of it. Okay. And you never mind about physical stuff. So high on this line, you're not willing to do any damage. Low on the line, you're willing to do a lot of damage. What are your levels of aspirations for social harmony? Okay, if I'm in a defensive state, resolving it is going back to harmony. What are my aspirations? My aspirations is I want to have extreme interior harmony and interpersonal harmony. So that's another dimension. And the final dimension is, how much harmony do you actually create? In the Buddhist tradition, there's the 10 ox cart pictures that show the different levels of enlightenment. And the last one is this guy walking through the village, and everywhere he goes, people feel enlightened. Okay, that's very high on your capacity to generate social harmony. It radiates. And we all know people who radiate that love, and we feel warmed by it, and it makes us more harmonious.
Okay, great. So you're saying that these 5 qualities.
Yeah, dimensions.
Of what do you call them?
Dimensions. Like these are 5 dimensions. Yeah.
Okay, these are 5 dimensions of defensive responses.
Yeah.
And all of those can exist at any stage of development.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, great. Because I agree.
Yeah. And so so as we grow, we find out where we're good and bad at regulating defensive states. Most people are worst at it in their family of origin, in their intimate relationships. And there's a reason for that. In your family of origin,
We say we reserve our worst behavior for the people who love us the most.
That's right. That's right. It's just.
I always remember that. I remember who said that, but I like.
I like it too. It's like the Werewolf of London. You know, every time he turned into a werewolf, he tried to find the person he loved the most and kill him. You know,
Yeah.
I know there's a reason I loved that movie when I was a kid. It was that. It was such a metaphor for the defensive states I was seeing all around me, my family. Everybody was turning
Wait,
into werewolves.
wait. What movie?
Okay, it was called The Werewolf of London. Okay. So this guy gets bit by a werewolf, right? And then he comes in Tibet of all places. Then he comes back to London. And when the moon's full, even a man whose heart is pure and says his prayers by night can become a wolf when the wolf bane blooms and the moon is full and bright. It's like turns into a werewolf and he seeks out the person he loves the most and wants to kill him. Okay. There's the metaphor. That's defensive.
Yeah, that is the metaphor for that extreme.
That's extreme. And you know, we get more primitive with the people we love. Now, that being said, that depth of contact, if it's utilized to get higher on the integration of defenses line, then that becomes an incredible source of personal, spiritual, relational, and physical growth. Because why?
Okay.
When a little defense, you enter a defensive state, I threaten you in some fashion. You enter a defensive state, I see it because we have the most expressive faces of any mammal. And then I feel threatened. I enter a defensive state. Now we have the defensive pattern. Okay, that harmonizes, but it's not harmonizing in a good way. We're self-amplifying up. Both of us really wanting connection, unable to do it, accelerating our defensive state, trying to create connection by attacking the other person, driving each other farther and farther away until something happens, something breaks. And that's what breaks: attack, defend, freeze, fight, flight, freeze. And the relationship then is injured because we have these phenomenal memories, and particularly for trauma. And so our phenomenal memories and our capacity for trauma say, oh, this is an unsafe relationship because this person is able to hurt me this much, you know, damage, commit this much damage. This creates then a history of damage that makes it harder to be close, easier to enter defensive states. You do that back and forth and get miserable, and 4 or 5 years later, you end up in Keith's office. And Keith goes, what do you want? We want to love each other better. Because it originally came from, I want connection, I'm not having it, and it's your fault. Okay. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's true, partly. You know, they both say that. Oh, yeah, you're both right. It is her fault. It is his fault. But you know what? It's your fault too. You know, it's like, so
using an example, Keith. So, you know, your wife pisses you off. I don't know.
I'll give you a great example. First of all, hear this. I've never had a couple session in my life. Well, maybe 2 or 3 where this didn't happen. Okay, so a couple comes in and she says, well, he deserted me at the parade. And he says, look, I didn't desert you. I had something to do. I had to go take a pee. I thought I had time. And she goes, oh, really? Okay, now it just happened. She's angry that he wasn't there for when she wanted him at the parade, and turned it into he betrayed me. He didn't betray her. He made a mistake. So she doesn't say you made a mistake that hurt me. She said you betrayed me. He feels threatened by that. His unconscious gives him a anger at her. That's amplified anger, amplified emotion, a distorted perspective. She's not a trustable woman. She's a bitch. And you know, that's it. Destructive impulse. I'm going to push back. I'm going to tell her how fucking wrong she is, because then she'll like me better. You know, just diminished capacity for self-reflection, because that's obviously idiocy, but you know, he can't see that. No empathy for her, because he's not saying, I get it. You felt injured that I wasn't there when you wanted, and I should have been. You know, I wanted to be, and I made a mistake, and I'm sorry. Okay. He would have liked to have said that, but he couldn't because he was caught up in the defensive state, was not aware of it. She similarly was caught up in a defensive state. So, you know, I interrupt him and tell him all this in one way, you know, in a way they can understand. And she says, no, he didn't make a mistake. He should have known better. She has this distorted perspective that it wasn't just a mistake, because I wouldn't be this angry at him. I wouldn't think he was this much of a dick if it was just a mistake. So she's holding on to the dick part. And so I have to point out that's a distorted perspective that you've got there. He made a mistake and you're treating him like he deliberately did something to hurt you, which he didn't. And so now this is your issue, because that means you can't really receive his genuine acknowledgement that he feels bad about making a mistake, and his general acknowledgement he made a mistake. He said it. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I believe him. Do you believe him? Now that's a powerful question, because she'll look over and she'll go, yes or no. If she goes, yes, I go, well, then you need to feel a little better than you feel right now. You need to feel the pleasure, because if you're not feeling the pleasure, you're not receiving the apology. Challenging her, and she'll start feeling the pleasure. And then, we make a little moment. Okay? If she says, I don't believe him, I go, well, what else do you want to talk about? Because we can't talk about this anymore. Because the only way that we can have a conversation is if you believe he's doing his best to tell the truth. And then we have that conversation, which I've had 1,000 times. Yeah, so we work our way through that. So that's an example of two defenses and a relational defensive pattern. Now escalating, and then I interrupt it. And then what I do is give them what they really, really wanted all along, which is connection. Okay.
And that's the aspire, and then finally embody harmony.
That's exactly right. I want them to go from not having any ability in that to having a lot of ability, but then I also want them to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And so at a beige level, I guess that's scarlet, and King keeps changing the colors on me. But anyway, at a beige level, like chimpanzees can have defensive states. All mammals can, but there's no self-awareness there. Okay, there's no self-reflection. So you can affect the defensive state of a chimpanzee by affecting their environment. It's like working with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. You can't really talk to them about, insight, but you can make it so that every time they start screaming, they get less attention, for instance. And every time they calm themselves down, they get a big smile. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm changing that, and then that affects their nervous system. So you can do that with chimpanzees too. Now, on a tribal level, things change. People can have self-awareness. But an interesting thing about tribes is that if you're in a real honest to God indigenous tribe living out in nature, you feel one with nature all the time. I mean, nature, you feel one with your tribe all the time. The tribe is an organism in nature, which is an organism. And what happens is you feel out of harmony with nature and the tribe. So what do you do when if that's chronic anger or anxiety or depression, whatever, it's out of harmony. So who do you go to? You go to the therapist, the shaman. And what does the shaman do? He creates ceremony to get you back into harmony. And to this day, if you go to the Navajo Nation and they're doing a healing ceremony, they're not doing a healing ceremony when somebody's sick to get them well. They're doing a healing ceremony to get them back into harmony. That's the focus of those ceremonies.
Yeah.
So that's at Magenta.
I was just listening to a book called the role of religion in the evolution of human culture, or something like that. It's that kind of a title. It's really good.
Cool.
And he's talking about this. And he asked, the Navajos, one of the tribes he studied personally, but he's doing this whole overview of the world. But he talked about just what you're saying, that the sickness was seen as an out of harmony at this stage of development. And that the idea is to get the whole group to be in harmony again. Yeah. So not just, making him, fixing him, but reworking the whole group.
Because we're all connected. So if he's sick, we're sick. So we want to get into harmony with him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that's
that's pretty
great. And you can see that in families. You can see that in any group of a certain level of intimacy. Right. Anyway, that, and of course, family systems is about not necessarily the person who's presenting the problem, but the whole system.
That was the seminal understanding of Bowen when he started family therapy, And he said the two things that mattered the most to him about being the father of family therapy were, one, that seeing families as systems rather than individuals, and two, it's a science that actually can be expanded and studied and explored. And he was most proud of those two things, Murray Boyne, and he was right. And if you go to any family, what do? They do ceremonies. They'll say grace before dinner. They'll have bedtime ceremonies for the kids. My dad used to play a ukulele and sing Hawaiian songs to my brother and me when we were 6 and 7 years old, sitting in our bunk bed. And that ceremony, to this day, I can't think of it without feeling a flood of love. That was a ceremony that we developed for soothing us and our family. And, it would have worked better for me if he would have said, I'm channeling God right now, Keith. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of steps that I could have maybe, not struggled so much with if he just would have acknowledged that's what was happening to me. They were secular people. Right. But so the shaman is the therapist, bring everybody back to harmony. People get more individualistic at red, and the power structures, of course, are authoritarian. And so when you're in those authoritarian power structures, you want to be secure, and you don't want to stand out in a way that will get you snagged. And so the therapist there becomes like Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching is very interesting. It was written for growth in an authoritarian environment. And so there's an awful lot about unity, an awful lot about being one with nature, an awful lot about being a support to the leader, assuming that they're trying to help everybody. And if you're a leader, being a wise and kind leader. And so that counselor that doesn't challenge the hierarchy, but instead says, let's make it the good king, the philosopher king. Let's make it more like that. So Lao Tzu is the therapist at red. When we go to amber, of course, what we have is the priest. And if you're a therapist working with someone who's a fundamentalist, that's great, because you just find out what their core beliefs are and their core values. You go, okay, great. That's our set of values. And now my job is to help you be true to your core values. And because the core values of all the traditions are great, so that just helps us move forward. Similarly with orange. I mean, orange feels like they can, when you start getting to umber and orange and green, now it's like, licensed therapist time. I don't feel bad. Yeah. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I mean, these are individualistic value memes. And so, you go, okay, now we can look with your inner community, and we can find out where the problems are. We can find out where the defensive states are, and so on. And at every level, what the counselor is doing, the shaman, the counselor, the priest, the therapist, you're trying to help people notice when they enter a defensive state and regulate it into a state of healthy response. That is a continuing thing. Up through green, where, of course, you want what you're doing to feel like it's consistent with your egalitarian, world-centric, love of the world and of nature, and so on. And every one of these value memes has blind spots. Tribal, if you're not a human being, if you're not a member of the tribe. Red, if you're threatening the power structure, you lose rights. Amber, if you're at the blind spot, if you're not part of the mythic membership, then you don't have the same human rights to people in the mythic membership. And you can be, and all the blind spots involve objectifying other people and exploiting them, neglecting them, extracting from them, that kind of thing. The blind spot of orange is taking advantage of its legal, which is, right now, America's extractive capitalism. With green, the blind spot is the contempt that they have for people that aren't world-centric, environmentally conscious, politically correct people. That dismissive stuff is a form of subtle violence that is invisible. That's a blind spot of green. Interestingly, at teal involves the opposite in a way of objectifying for a blind spot. The blind spot of teal is that teal you have so many perspectives available. If someone challenges a defensive state, which is a very visceral experience, the blind spot is to contextualize yourself away from the lived experience. So you go, Keith, you're getting a little defensive about this. A good example, 2 or 3 times in the last 20 years, somebody's asked me about pot. And, it's been illegal almost that whole time, right? Or, all my life. And so I'll say some version of, I have the same standards for my own use that I have for my clients. And 2 or 3 people said, okay, but that's pretty intense, Keith, how you just said that. And I wasn't aware that it was intense. Okay. I was curious. I went, whoa, there's some stuff there. So now if I just went, well, of course there's some stuff because it's illegal and blah, blah, and cops. I'm contextualizing away from, wait a minute, there's a surge of experience. What's going on deeper inside you around that surge of experience? How come you still have that, when it's all legal and everything? Oh, well, that's because, in this culture that, there's been such a history of, I'm contextualizing, and go, wait, no. I'm contextualizing away from the lived experience. That's a blind spot at Teal. Because if you go deeper and deeper into the lived experience, at some point, there'll be a genuine opportunity for transformation. Somewhere.
So follow that. What would that look like in using the example of pot?
Okay, well, it would look like it. So I'm going to just go with this. So how come I'm intense? I'm angry. What are you angry? I'm angry at this culture that has threatened me my whole life. Okay, but they're not threatening you now. But what? Yeah, I guess I'm scared. What are you scared of? Well, I'm scared of what. Now, you notice how I contextualize. I mean, I'm demonstrating it, but I'm trying to go back to the felt experience. I'm scared of the culture perceiving me for who I am, which is a threat to the culture. I mean, I'm a threat to most cultures because whatever the sacred cow is of that culture, I have clarity thinking about it. I have a threat that I will be discovered and injured in some fashion. Oh, really? So you still have a sense, Keith, that if you're fully transparent in cultures, you'll get injured. Yeah, I'm scared of that. What's true about that? Well, it's actually, there's a lot of cultures where that's 100% true. Okay. But there's other cultures, Keith, like your relationship with Jeff, where that's not true. There's no aspect of you that you could reveal with him that would cause him to do that. Now, as I say that, I'm not feeling fear or anger anymore. I'm feeling a sense of kind of warmth. I'm going, okay, so now there's a community. This is going back to healthy purple, magenta. I actually have a tribe where they can know me as deeply as I know myself, maybe more deeply, and they love me for who I am and forgive me for my weak places, my other stuff. They don't define me by that and help me with those things and know that I'm motivated to change those things, even though I indulge them sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I went all the way down, and at the bottom there was a connectedness that I was needing to feel, which was, yeah, there's a lot of larger cultures. I mean, God help me if I got dropped down into, I don't know, Iran or something. I mean, Jesus, you can imagine. But I'm not. I'm in my little tribe. I'm in my tribe here in the world where I can deal with the cultures around and get along really well with them. And I can be myself with them too. There's just aspects of me that they wouldn't understand or wouldn't approve of. Okay, that's fine. You see, so now what I've done now is I feel that I took that down, and so someone says, "So do you smoke pot?" Yeah, I smoke pot, and it's a lot more fun now that it's legal, and I have the same standards for myself that I have for my clients. Okay, the edge changed. It's a little bit of transformation.
Yeah.
So,
and because you live in a world where you can choose to aspire to harmony and embody harmony.
That's right.
There's really nothing stopping you much. I mean, in the culture that we live in.
So you and I were talking about this in the beginning about our monasteries.
Yeah.
You and I each live in a monastery that works really well because there's a lot of rules, but all the rules are designed by us to support us and to give us structure. So,
yeah. No, and it's an astonishing privilege, really, to be able to live this way. What percentage of human beings have been had that opportunity in all of history? Some,
I
not
guess.
nobody, but we're two of them at this point, and that's worth noting, and also a certain responsibility to do the best you can, and not to fall into the destructive, impulsive, any more than you absolutely have to.
Well, you notice you just noted, you just demonstrated high aspiration to create social harmony and ability to create social harmony. Even St. Augustine, he was a real free thinker, but he had to make all the stuff he said consistent with Catholic doctrine. Okay. To this day, if I talk to a professional group, I can talk about spirituality, but then I have to anchor it in some kind of secular right quadrant language that and data that makes it a little bit more credible. And even then, you bringing up those terms, I would love to address a plenary session of the APA about the integration of spirituality and science in integrally informed psychotherapy. Don't think it's ever going to happen, but actually, if I ever do that, and I'm saying this publicly right now, if I ever did that, I would go buy a suit. I would go and I'd get one tailored. I'd make it comfortable. If they ever invite me to address APA plenary, I'm going to go out and buy a suit. And
aren't they there yet? The APA? They're not there yet.
Not there yet.
Boy.
Well, the good news about that is I don't have to wear a suit, but the bad news is that I don't get to go talk to them.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about what makes this an authentic line, lines have stages. So, Jeff, how do you know when you're entering a defensive state? How do you tell?
I can definitely feel it in the body.
What do you feel?
Anger, hatred, resentment, a big storyline.
Distorted perspective. Yeah.
And I'm way better at catching myself doing it. So I have a conscious incompetence most of the time instead of an unconscious competence.
So what do you do?
You know what I mean?
What happens?
Well, depending on how much I want to indulge it or send it, I will act accordingly. Sometimes if I'm having a friend and we're having a trolling relationship online or whatever.
Okay.
And I don't do that much, really. I just don't. It's not that fun. And so more and more, actually, when that kind of thing happens, I really, rather than argue for my point of view, which, I want to do and might still do some, I'm more interested in their point of view, actually. And that's not easy. That feels like it's like taking one of those things where you open your rib cage.
Oh yeah.
It's opening your heart, except it requires one of those jaws of death thing where they open your rib cage. Yeah. And so but when I do that, it's great. And it definitely, it is an aspiration to harmony. Yes. And often it gets to harmony.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I do to facilitate that is I'll ask for God's help.
Oh, I love that.
How about that? What do you think of them apples? But yeah, I will. I don't know exactly who God is in this case, but my higher power, or I don't even like that formulation that much. I actually prefer to think of this force I'm praying to. If you were asking help, it's not a very complicated prayer. It's just like, help me let go of this. Help me to see her point of view. It's simple enough. And I prefer to think of it as an other, not just a dimension of myself. But who knows? It all sort of gets hard to sort out. But that's amazing how much it helps.
So
I can't believe it sometimes.
So look at what you just
I'll be
demonstrated.
obsessed about some fight I'm having.
Yeah, obsessed.
Obsessed.
Uh-huh.
Not like I used to be, but no, I notice it, and I notice obsession, and and then of course my my need to inflict damage arises. Now, I'm not going to hurt anybody, but intellectual, demolish their argument.
Yes.
Damage their argument.
Yeah.
So
you want to attack it.
Yeah, exactly. But what I've realized, and it just is like even in the last year, and I'm 70, is you can't make other people see the world the way you do. It's like even you're talking about your couple, and she gets abandoned at the parade. I mean, they just see the world differently. I mean, it's hard, and you got to live with people who see the world differently than you, and seeing them as defective versions of you is not that helpful.
So look, you just demonstrated altitude, and particularly at an integral level. You demonstrated altitude on the integration of defenses line. You catch it, you reach for compassionate understanding. You can't change their mind, but you can shift from them feeling not understood by you to feeling understood by you. And you can shift from them not feeling accepted by you and cared about by you to them feeling accepted and cared about. And when they shift to feeling understood and cared about, they don't realize it. They're getting out of their defensive state. Their perspectives are becoming less distorted. Their emotions are getting less amplified or numb. They're having a little bit more self-awareness, and then they have a little empathy for you. That little bit of empathy for you will cause them to understand a little bit about your perspective. And so you've just generated social harmony by demonstrating altitude on the integration of defenses line. And I like, the asking for the other. I mean, I believe that the other world's happening all the time, but for me, sometimes I want, Krishna is who I discovered in the ninth chakra. Sometimes just ask Krishna to weigh in. Krishna is never going to let me do something stupid without laughing at me. I mean, that's how I get disciplined by Krishna. Krishna goes, "Are you fucking kidding me, Keith? You're going to do that?" And that's usually enough. And so that's God in the second person. I don't know how that happened for me, but it did.
So good.
And so, well, in the second tier, we allow that stuff and we normalize that stuff, and it makes sense intuitively. It doesn't have to make sense necessarily rationally.
Absolutely. So that's worth a pause, because when we're talking integral consciousness and integral age, it's trans-rational. It includes rationality when rationality is called for. And it's very good at rationality when rationality is called for. But it realizes, that there is dimensions of reality where rationality is not called for.
Right.
And, you got to be careful of those territories where rationality, so rationality is a hard-won achievement of humanity to, suppress some of the cruelties and craziness that humans are prone to and have been. I mean, human history, with the history.
Oh, the pre-trans stuff, especially. Yeah.
So yes, we want rationality, but we then see that's not just the only thing that there is. And that's relatively new in cultural development.
Shockingly new.
Yeah, it is.
And
Green gets a lot of credit for it because green is willing to go out there and be non-rational and sort of has a grudge against intelligence, and there's because of the power structures and all of that stuff. And Green does a good job at deconstructing that and letting a lot of stuff in that was never allowed, was not allowed in rationality.
Purple. Green brings
Yeah.
Green legitimatizes the shamanic experience. Teal systematizes it. At Teal,
Love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
At Teal, we don't just surrender to it, to legitimize it. We systematize it. Yeah. I'm listening to the podcasts that Roger and Don DePay and Roger Walsh are doing with A.H. Almas. Okay.
Really?
Oh God. They're having 12 segments. I'm on the second one. The second one just came out. I'm going to listen to it this weekend. I'm in Keith Hogg heaven listening to these.
Oh, that's so good.
Oh God. Well, I'm
going to ask a very probably stupid and naive question. H.H. Almas is still alive?
Oh yeah, he's not still alive. He's cooking. He's as close to. If there's a Buddha walking around as close, it's if you took A.H. Almas and the Dalai Lama and you put them in a room together, it would be like having Lao Tzu and Buddha in the same room together. Those guys are dialed in. And I wrote Roger and I told him what I love about A.H. Almas is that he describes the territory and doesn't reify the journey. Like I studied Vajrayana, and I've studied Taoism, and Bhagavad Gita, and the God help me, the Bible and stuff. And I just get so irritated by the reification. But when they get to the territory, my kingdom is in your heart, immunity, non-dual reality, experiencing God in a leaf. The territory is all described. So it almost doesn't reify. He just talks about the territory, which is why he's one of my favorite spiritual writers. Because
I mean, I've been aware of him for decades, so it's like I just assumed his time had come and gone. But this is Diamond Approach.
Yeah. He's the father of the Diamond Approach.
Yeah,
he's one of the original guys bringing together traditional psychology and science with traditions in an accessible manner that involves community. The Diamond people, if you're part of the Diamond people, you're part of a group that goes on for years doing intense intrapsychic and interpersonal work that's all based on being open-hearted, being authentic, being in integrity. It's all the stuff that we've been talking about, and this is a spiritual system that takes you deeper and deeper into realizations. And eventually he has what he calls the pearl beyond price. Pearl beyond price is a realization of feeling unity with your soul. Though he would distinguish between soul and the pearl. I'm not going to get into that, but
distinguish between soul and what?
And the pearl. He calls it the pearl beyond price. That center. Yeah. But I know that sense of identity with that's a felt experience of mine that he speaks to because he hasn't reified his path there. He described the experience and gave me a chance to sign on because that's how I learn stuff. And that's how I've always been. I've been mostly a rogue realizer, and rogue realizers find their own path. And then they either find people that are happy to join with them, or they go, well, you don't have a lineage that I approve of. I've had that happen a couple of times. I go, okay, fine. Now, when I go, okay, fine, notice I'm entering a defensive state where I'm, feeling superior to this person that's mad at me for not having a lineage. And so, okay, what's that about, Keith? And then then the whole thing about going down, where's the transformational opportunity? Whatever narcissistic wounds I've had, they've really been, a lot of them have been healed by this process. Because there's a difference between being better than somebody at something and being superior to somebody. There's a difference between uh, being equal under God's eyes, of soul to soul, feeling that subjective experience, not just other people, but other beings. The bumblebee and stuff. Feeling that experience within the context of a food chain, within the context of social hierarchies, all those things fit together. When they fit together well, you know where you are in a moment. And what that does is it heals narcissistic wounds where you get stuck, or other wounds, trauma wounds and stuff like that. And that's one of the beautiful things about psychotherapy. We're all into that. And generally, if there's a wound, there'll be a defensive state that will arise out of that wound if there's a cue that's experienced by your shadow self as threatening. And then it depends on how high you are at that moment on the integration of defenses line of development. Now, Becky told me that I should get another name for it. She said, that's really awkward. Integration of defenses line of development is harder to remember. I've already forgotten it. And you just told it to me 10 seconds ago. And I've been trying to think of a better name and I haven't come up with one because I've been teaching it as the integration of defenses line for 20 years. But I think she's right. I think I should come up with a better name. And maybe I will.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But, it does say it.
It does say what I want to say. We'll come up with something. And so there it is. That I want, people have asked me over the years, is there any more information about that? Any more data about it? Now there is. There's this podcast with you, this Shrinking Pundit, and the one I did with Corey. And I think that's important. Basically, if you're a psychotherapist or a change worker or a coach or anything like that, there's some things you really need to know. I mean, one is to know the difference between normal crazy and extra crazy, which we've talked about. And the other one is to know about the integration of defenses line and whether someone's in a defensive state or not, and how to help them regulate into a state of healthy response and what that looks like as you develop. And so that's what this is all about. Yeah. And there you go.
Yes. Well, we aspire to and embody harmony, if we can, basically.
Well, right? On that note, we aspire to harmony, to create it and feel it if we can. On that note, I'm going to declare victory on this Shrinking Pundit episode with my beloved Jeff.
Yeah, I'm with you, brother.
And much love to everybody.
Much love to everybody, and take care, and we'll see you next time.